The AEW Effect. We talk about the AEW Effect and the effect it's had on professional wrestling. Not in 18 years since WCW has been bought out by Vince McMahon. Had we seen any other wrestling promotion make Vince and others in the WWE sit up and start to take notice? Not Impact Wrestling, not Ring of Honor, not House of Glory, not even New Japan Pro Wrestling, who has come here in the States and tried to put on shows at MSG. What other wrestling promotions haven't done is made Vince McMahon nervous and sit up and say, uh-oh, I got to do something. AEW has. And we're going to talk today about the effects that AEW has had on the wrestling business as a whole and the wrestling business that Vince McMahon does and his practices as to what he's going to do moving forward. Tony Khan, Chris Jericho, Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, these are all guys who decided, hey, there needs to be an alternative. And we're going to put out an alternative to WWE because A, we don't want to work for Vince, and B, well, why not work for someone who will give us the freedom creatively to be professional wrestlers, pro wrestlers, to do what we love to do. And that's Tony Khan and Shad Khan, the Khan family, who is probably matched up with Vince McMahon in terms of money. They own the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have plenty of money to be financial backers to these guys. And these guys said, listen, Tony, listen, tell your dad that we want to do this. This is real. And they made an alternative. And what else is out there, including WWE, right? So you say, why is WWE worried about the effect that it's going to have on its business? Well, because now more than ever, AEW has a TV deal that's going to start in October. They're going to be on TNT. And the WWE is moving SmackDown to Fridays on Fox Sports 1. So why would WWE worry about this? Well, the WWE would worry about this because Vince is going to pay for the mistakes that he's made and has had now to rely on the sports entertainment part of his federation, that he has to now say, okay, I have to go back to what made this work. I have to go back to professional wrestling. I have to now make it what everybody else is making it out there. I have to follow the standard, basically. And Vince is not only going to have to follow the standard, but he's going to have to make sure that these guys all have some sort of creative change. It's a part of what the AEW effect has had on Vince McMahon, and has now locked down all of his talents in big term contracts because of AEW. He doesn't want to let any of them go. None of them. He has them all signed to big term contracts because he wants to keep them there. He doesn't want them to go anywhere. AJ Styles, right? We talk about AJ Styles. We talk about AJ Styles saying that he wants to retire with Vince. Why? I don't know, the hope of Paul Heyman changing Raw and maybe Eric Bischoff changing the direction, because we found out this week that Eric Bischoff, in fact, is not going to be an executive director like we talked about once before, that Eric Bischoff isn't a creative guy like Paul Heyman. He's a creative guy in terms of TV shows and the direction of which it should go, but not as a creative director. So WWE making that big announcement about creative director, it fell on deaf ears because nothing has changed in terms of what has creatively happened to the show. Now, this past week on SmackDown, it was supposedly the second week that Eric Bischoff would have been the creative director, if you will. And there has been some change because the show went in a different direction, which is great. So now Vince has locked down all his talents. Dolph Ziggler, AJ Styles, the Good Brothers, he has them all locked into 5-year deals. there's a couple of wrestlers that are still remain a big question mark as to whether or not they're going to sign big time contracts, like Randy Orton and a lot of other superstars that will be a good possibility. So Vince fears that the fact that AEW, All Elite Wrestling, seems to be stacked up with people right now who bosses, Tony Khan and Shad Khan, who are sports businessmen. WWE Hall of Famer Jim Ross has joined the AEW stable, who hasn't enjoyed his role in WWE in the recent years. He signed a 3-year contract with AEW, which is absolutely amazing, because anybody who's going to be flipping around on TNT in October is going to say, isn't that the voice that used to be on WWE? What's going on here? And then they're going to see Chris Jericho and they're going to say, oh, wait a second. I remember watching that guy. That guy is awesome. I love Chris Jericho. Let me see what's going on. Wait, he's the world champion? So the AEW effect is absolutely 100% real. There's no question about it. And when you talk about Vince McMahon, we all talk about, what's wrong with you, Vince? What's wrong with you, Vince? Why? Why did you not take this company in a better direction? Paul Heyman says he wants realism on Raw. He wants, if a guy gets injured on week 1, week 2, 3, and 4, he might not be there. He might be back at 4, but at least 2 and 3, he's going to be out, because they want to make it look as real as possible as they can get it, and that's a big thing. And so Vince is going to have a huge problem with Paul Heyman if Paul Heyman doesn't get what he wants, because as we know, Paul Heyman's an overall booker. He's got the creative knowledge. He can run a show. He can do a lot of things. So Vince McMahon definitely fears the AEW effect, and the fact that they're also going to have to figure out what they're going to do as far as keeping the direction of the WWE in a good one. Also, in the last few years, the WWE shows haven't been doing well, as we talked about already. The direction of Raw and SmackDown have just been terrible. The sports entertainment-like direction hasn't done anything for Vince or the WWE in the last few years. So many wrestling fans have just said, I don't want to watch it. The viewership has dramatically dropped in the last few years, and in May 2019 Raw episodes of SmackDown and Raw have 20 to 25 fewer viewers than they did in the previous year. 25% to 30%. That's a lot. That's a lot for Vince to lose. So, we have to see what Vince is going to do. And the viewership over the last 5 years has gone as a whole down 32%. I'm sorry, Vince, but your direction and the direction that you're going in is absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. All the contribution to the WWE is worse ratings outside of the NFL season, the holidays, and everything else. So, Vince, you can't make an excuse. We have to figure out what's going on with WWE and push it in the right direction. So this announcement of putting out creative directors, maybe a good one, maybe it's not. I mean, people, like to say that maybe wrestling isn't doing as well as it once did 20 years ago, but those wrestling fans are still out there. I'm still here. I still followed the business. I didn't really watch the business much in terms of, the overall product, but I followed the behind the scenes. I followed the stories. I followed the wrestlers' lives. I've seen the product, and so I'm not blind to it, but I didn't enjoy it. I mean, there's a difference between enjoying something and watching something and saying, I really love this product, and what I want to see next week is, I can't wait. I can't wait to see what happens next week. That's not the direction that Vince has taken this company in. And Vince needs to sit up and look at where he's going